the connection that the mind has for all of this, and the possibility of the mind to overtake the physical. And then there are people who are folklorists or adventure seekers, and we all kind of live in this bubble and sometimes get grouped together. Sometimes we don't really play on the same field. We don't even play in the same sport sometimes, and yet we have this kind of connection that kind of flows. And sometimes those who are on one end of the spectrum are tainted by those who are on the other end. And so it's really this kind of odd place that we live in, because those who are uninitiated, or even those who don't spend a lot of time doing this, they tend to group, and they tend to understand that there's a lot of different things out there that kind of are called paranormal that aren't paranormal. There are a lot of people out there who are doing things their own way, and they have to kind of be acknowledged for that. And if you really want to know what's going on around here, and if you really want to know what this stuff's about, you kind of have to get a picture of everything. And I'm hoping that tonight's guest, tonight's person hanging out in the crossroads with me, can help us with that. She is, in my opinion, now we started off by saying that I said I wasn't going to kiss her ass. I wasn't going to say too many nice things. And almost instantly off the bat, I'm going to break my promise to her, because in my opinion, which I always tell my students, you should never say in my opinion, but both in the public eye, but also definitely behind the scenes, I think she is one of the most influential and definitely one of the most solid and thoughtful voices in the paranormal. And I think that she's a very heavy feminine influence in the paranormal, which is definitely needed. But beyond that, she is just, I think, one of the top paranormal thinkers, and she's very active, and that also makes her very important to what we do and to the field. And her name is Deanna Kelly. So, Deanna, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. You've said such wonderful things in the opening monologue. I feel like I can just go home now. I mean,
and I didn't even write it down. Can you believe it? I'm totally just like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm gonna say something. So yeah, I'm very proud of myself being, it's also falling on my words. So
it totally came from the heart, and that's when the best prose emerges, is when it's meaningful.
Well, I mean, because when you and when I first asked you to kind of come on the show, and I first said, you're one of the thinkers I want to bounce things off of, you immediately said, I'm waiting for people who can have intelligent conversations about the paranormal. It's not just the television shows, and it's not just the legend trips, and it's not just things like going to these famously haunted places, but it's also the context of everything, which is something that a lot of people that I hang around with have been talking about for years. Like, why are we not looking at the bigger picture? And instantly, you started talking about some of the things that are being done by parapsychology, which to some of the people who are into ghosts is about as far from what they actually do as you can possibly get. I mean, the two aren't even related to. Well, they're related to each other in a way because they're weird and unusual, and maybe they have an influence. But there's very little of parapsychology that is focused on the search for ghosts.
Well, yes, in a way, that's accurate, but not completely.
Okay.
We can get into that in this hour, but when we talk about ghosts, what are we talking about? What is that really? That's a collection of phenomena that we've labeled as ghost, but a lot of it may not have anything to do with what we think a ghost is. I mean, we don't really even have a definition of a ghost, do we?
It's really tough. When I was writing, and I'm sure you came across the same thing when you were working on your paranormal or ghost specific book. So You Want to Hunt Ghosts. See, I got the book title in there, the new one. I'm sure you came across the same issue that I came across when I was writing Picture Yourself Ghost Hunting, which is, it's almost impossible to write a book like that without first kind of defining the field that you're playing on, without defining the players of the game. And the first thing everyone wants to know is, well, what is a ghost? And you have to tackle that. And that's not necessarily an easy thing to do. And so, one of the things it does is it offers you an opportunity to to describe all the things that aren't a ghost.
Yeah, of course. Like
And
orbs and
well, I mean,
and all of that.
even things, and of course, everything you say, you realize that someone's going to argue with you about whether or not what you're saying is true. But it's like, for example, I would not include something like a doppelganger as a ghost.
Of course not. Yeah.
I would not even necessarily define something. Well, I guess maybe I would put, a astral projection or even a thought form as a ghost. But I
Hmm.
guess in that book, I really kind of said, a ghost is something that was once alive or is connected to something that's alive. For example, like as a thought form could be in some ways. And then it's kind of after that, everything else is not a ghost. And we can define what all the rest of the stuff is. So you're
Hmm.
right. It's
Hmm.
really, really hard. What is your definition of one?
I don't know if I have one, and that's fascinating in and of itself. I believe when we are going out into the field, and we really need to consider ourselves as field workers, we are collecting data out in the field as opposed to parapsychologists who are stuck in labs all day. We are really collecting data out there in the world regarding probably a collection of anomalous events. And I really feel that we are probably encountering many different types of phenomena, but we are labeling it under one, you know, one
Right.
thing.
One
It's
big
this
umbrella.
ghost. Yeah, and I'm not really sure if that is the best way that we can conduct our research and help people, or um, document stories for the people who want to document stories. And that's where parapsychology could be very helpful for people who are serious about research and learning how to identify the different types of phenomena that's occurring, and how to properly document that, and how to properly help people who are suffering these crazy things, or how to properly tell a new story about these historical sites that we go to. um,
Right.
Ghosts are sexy and cool, and I think a lot of people like having them, even if they find the events in their surroundings to be frightening. They enjoy the experience of having a ghost because it releases them from the mundane everydayness of their lives.
And that's kind of like, if you have, I'm not sure if you have an ebook version of Paranormal Obsession, your first book. I'm not sure if you have an ebook version of that, but one of the things that's really kind of changed, even maybe even since that book was published, is that it now is a popular thing. You advertise that your house for sale is haunted.
Yeah.
And I know you talked a lot about the media impact and the back and forth between what we understand about ghosts and what is actually true about ghosts via the media in that book. But I'm not sure if did you get into like the societal kind of things, such as like our changing perspective on ghosts, bait, like, and the results of that, things like the real estate market. And
I do a little bit. I believe I spoke with one realtor who said that in Connecticut, homes that are haunted list for 7% more
wow.
than and in his area. It's probably not true in all areas of
Right,
Connecticut, but
right.
at least in his area, if a location is known to be haunted, they can get up to 7% more for it on the market, which is interesting. Um, but I one thing I did look at in the book is how the concept of ghost has changed throughout history.
Right.
And there was a time, like 120 years ago, for example, there were more reports of crisis apparitions, people seeing apparitions of living people, only to find out later that they had just died or had just experienced something, major trauma. There were more reports of that than of ghost. And I like to ask the question, why has that trend reversed? Is it because of something in our culture, or is it because like there's just more ghosts around? Like maybe they've all become unionized or something, or I mean,
The crisis apparition can't get through because
yeah.
the dark the dark shadow person is no, this is my house, go find another one, go
They totally fell off the fiscal cliff like 100 years ago.
it's interesting. I think when our perception of ghosts change, when we as people then die, how we act as a ghost might change. And I'll give you a good example. This is one of the things I brought up. I've talked about it before, but you've never heard it, so it's new to you, so you can act
Mhm.
surprised. Um,
Okay.
But during the Civil War, especially with the rise of spiritualism right around there, my Latin's horrible, even though I'm Italian, but there was this concept of what they call a good death. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and a good death meant that you were with your family, you were at your home, you were surrounded by people you know, and you gave last words of wisdom. You passed things down orally to people, and then if all those things happened, you were able to kind of be at peace. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and so what happened was during the Civil War, so many people were so far away from home that they couldn't do that.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why some people believe there are so many Civil War ghosts. And it's actually interesting because there was an unwritten, unspoken kind of honor of that, even between the armies, in that if you were a Confederate and you had a Union soldier and he was dying, you would search through his pockets because people were known to carry pictures and items of their family, and you would actually surround the person with these items so they felt as if they were having a good
Mm-hmm.
death. And I think for a time, maybe being a ghost and leaving this world the right way meant that you appeared to the person you loved and you said it was going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And this maybe now as people, we don't, as humans, as living people, we don't feel that important anymore. That's not part
Yeah.
of our spectrum. So in theory, when we die, we don't think that ghosts do that anymore. And so as a ghost, we might be less inclined to do it.
Uh, I suppose so, but then the question I would ask about that is we now, a lot of the ways we define ghosts today is interpreted through technology,
Mm.
like the way a ghost appears in a picture, whether it's an orb or a black mass or something like that, or the way a ghost sounds in our digital audio recorders. So how can we take that conversation you just had and apply it to, like, why are ghosts suddenly flashes of light or like mechanical sounding voices? I mean, how do you bridge that discussion with a good death?
Well, I think because we now speak through technology. We now text each
Yeah.
other more than we talk to each other. We now
Hmm.
call each other more than we hug each other. And so therefore, when we communicate after death, maybe we feel, especially because we've now been told for years that this is what ghosts do. Now we don't rely on that. It's a lot more real for them if they see it on their computer. I sometimes get emails from people, or especially when I'm interviewing them either live or on the phone, and they're apologetic if their ghost story isn't sensational enough. Right? I mean, if they have
Yeah.
if they have a crisis apparition kind of situation happen to them, they feel that, well, I know this isn't like what other people are experiencing, so it's probably
Hmm.
not that big, but here's the thing that completely changed my life and was profound, and I'm going to
Yeah.
apologize for that.
That is so interesting you brought that up because if you're like me, you've done a lot of investigating, and honestly, most of the times when you go to places where there's real activity, the claims are not that fantastical. They are often fairly consistent and maybe have multiple witnesses, but it's not like you've got crap flying across the room or like, demons with teeth like spitting blood out of the walls.
Right, right.
Most of the time it's actually kind of weird and different, but it's not incredibly obvious that something's going on.
Right, and it's usually a lot of things, and as a writer, and as a really strong writer, Deanna, by the way, um,
Thank you.
you probably, when you're writing, and you're a little bit more straightforward than me, who's a little bit more of the folklorist in me when I write, um, a natural kind of narrative happens.
Yeah.
By the time someone contacts a researcher or an investigator, they've already made a story. They had a beginning where
Hmm.
something started happened, it escalated a little bit, then something happened, usually to spark them to call. It's usually not, wow, for years I've been hearing this rapping, behind my wall, and I just decided to call you. There's usually some kind of natural plot that develops.
Yes. Yes.
And then of course we go in and we add to that plot, right?
Hmm.
So what was the climax for them becomes a trigger for us to fall back on my English teacher background. So it's it's very interesting that we then become part of that. And what happens is when you do that is that things take on significance. So you're investigating and you might find something that's active, but it's significant only in the context of all the other stuff that has happened. So
Yes.
it's one of those things where if it happened and you were at your house and it happened, you'd be like, oh my word, something really weird is happening. But when you're there and there's all this other stuff that has gone on in the house, you're like, wow, yes, you're right. This confirms
Hmm.
every
Hmm.
single thing you said, no matter how weird and unusual or strange or exotic it was. The fact that that light just flickered means that, yes, totally, you've been seeing dark figures at the edge of your bed. It justifies,
Exactly. Yeah.
one little thing justifies all the big things that they've been saying.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're right. It becomes a narrative. And then it's funny. I've had cases where they will take the most random historical events that may or may not be associated with that property, and it becomes hugely significant. And it may be significant. I'm not suggesting it's not, but there was one case where there were 1,000 things going on, and one felt demonically oppressed, and the other one was dealing with a lot of issues, and she kept seeing orbs fly off the TV, and then she just sort of threw in there, and someone used to kill puppies out back. And then the Bible's been going across the room, and it was just like all of a sudden dogs and all these other stuff got in there, and maybe there are spirits of dead tortured puppies running through the house. But you bring up a very good point, and the point I'm trying to make in a long-winded way is that people's belief language and what they think is happening in the home is very important for investigators to listen to. I mean, that
Right.
story that the clients tell is really the narrative you need to either be working with or deconstructing. And and when you do come in and you find information or you experience something that doesn't quite fit with the client's story or with the property story, sometimes it's really fascinating, but a lot of times it's like a personal affront
Right.
because you're literally